Unfortunately, the Dolphins suffer their second setback of the season. Now 5-2 on the year. But hey, I've got some good news for us, and that is we are so close to the next milestone of 48K. So if you haven't yet, subscribe, join the #1 Dolphins community on YouTube because we are bringing you daily Dolphins content. We're so close to 48K. We got a ton to get to on Overreaction Monday, and that's next on Dolphins Today. Unfortunately, it was not the Dolphins' night on the road at Lincoln Financial Field. They suffer their second setback of the season, losing to the Eagles 31-17. Tons to take away from that. I'm talking Overreaction Monday at its finest. We also have some injury news and a major news bop that was from earlier today about Isaiah Wynn. So we will get into that. But just to recap you on last night, 31-17, the final. Lowest season output scoring-wise for the Dolphins. They were able to just muster one offensive touchdown. Did have the pick six by Baker on the defensive end. So some good things to take away and some other areas, perhaps some causes for concern. Tua was 23 of 32, 216 yards. I thought he was really accurate. The one touchdown. Tyreek actually dropped a touchdown, which was very uncharacteristic for him. And the one interception, very costly in the fourth quarter when the Dolphins were going in for a game-tying score. So it was not the best showing from Tua, but he made some really good throws. On the Eagles side of things, Jalen Hurts, 23 of 31 for 279 yards with the two touchdowns. One interception, as I mentioned, the pick six. That was really made by Kader Kohou, who was able to deflect the ball at the line of scrimmage. Baker catches it and takes it in for 6. So saw some good things from the defense. And when you have a tough loss like this, it's easy to overreact, but I love what Mike McDaniel had to say on the loss. If you're going to lose games, you want it to be against a really good team, and you want it to hurt. The collection of coaches and players in the locker room are hurting because they feel like they left some plays on the field. And that's exactly how I felt watching that game last night, that although the Dolphins clearly didn't have their A game, they had opportunities in that game. But like it always happens on a Monday, we've got Overreaction Monday for you. And I scanned the message boards, read the comments, you look on Twitter and everything else, and you can see these types of reactions to what happened on Sunday night against the Eagles. The first one being, the Dolphins can't beat a good team. They're 0-2 against good teams. All 5 wins have come against teams with losing records. We've heard it, and believe me, that type of narrative is following this team around, and perhaps there are some causes for concern. 0-2 against teams with a winning record. The 5 wins this year are against teams with a combined record of 8-25. So, even I'll pause and say, yeah, there's merit to what people are saying about that. There's actual proof in the pudding about the Dolphins being unable to beat a good team this year. And since 2022, this is a little bit concerning. The Dolphins are 0-6 on the road against teams that went on to win a playoff game that ensuing year. So they haven't been able to prove that they can get it done against good teams. Part of that, the opposition have had breakout games against the Dolphins in their 2 losses this year. Look at the numbers. 4 touchdowns for Josh Allen. He had a field day. Now, it wasn't Jalen Hurts' best game, but he made enough plays to win. 2 touchdowns with the 1 interception, 279 yards. What might be even more concerning, the opposing wide receivers in losses. They have had elite games. Stephon Diggs, tied a career high with 3 touchdowns in the win over the Dolphins. And A.J. Brown last night just continued to be on the tear. That's 5 straight games of 120-plus yards receiving for him. He had 137 last night and the 1 touchdown. So there's areas in which it would surely point to the Dolphins are unable to beat good teams. So I ask you, is it in fact time to panic in Miami? They've played 2 good teams, and they've lost both times. So I want to know from you, how concerned are you with this Miami Dolphins team? Scale it for me in the comments, 1 through 10. I got to be honest with you, and I always am on Dolphins Today. last night didn't put me in a panic mode at all. And when you think about and this, I don't want this to sound like excuses, more actual facts surrounding this game. The Dolphins were without several key contributors in this situation. When you're on the road, Sunday Night Football, you got to give the Eagles some credit. Perhaps the favorite to win the NFC again, and that's a tough environment to play in. And the Dolphins had chances. There was two different times in that game where I really thought, okay, Miami is going to weather the storm, and even though they didn't have their A game, they are going to put themselves in a position to perhaps have a crack at this. Obviously, it didn't play out that way, but the situation and the reality of that situation, the Dolphins were really shorthanded last night. Without Xavier Howard, without Connor Williams, you lose Jaylen Waddle for a large portion of that game. You lose Isaiah Wynn. The list goes on and on. Jevon Holland, another guy that missed some time in that game. So I know that's part of the game. I'm not making excuses, but I do think it's worth pointing out. And some missed opportunities. Tyreek Hill, great game. I still contend that he's the best wide receiver in the NFL, but he dropped a short touchdown. It was just kind of a fluky play that went off. He made the catch as he was securing the catch. It went off his knee and turned into an incomplete pass. He was going to walk into the end zone in that one. There were some missed opportunities there and some uncharacteristic mistakes and the penalties. The Dolphins dug their own grave, and some of that you could make the case, which we're going to get into a little bit later. Maybe some of that was poor officiating, but a lot of factors that went against the Dolphins in that game, and way too many of them to throw your hands up and say, I'm totally panicked, but I'm not telling you how to feel. So if, in fact, you are panicked, I suppose I understand because of the Dolphins' shortcomings against good teams this year. But let's relax a little bit. You're still in the driver's seat in first place in the AFC East, and winning a division is the first step for this team. So coming up, we're going to dive into exactly how bad that officiating was on Sunday night. But first, I got to tell you about Prize Picks because it's the most exciting and easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. So how's it work, Jake? Well, I'm glad you asked, and you don't even need a pen and paper for this explanation because it's so simple. With Prize Picks, you merely pick more or less of a player's projected stat total. So Prize Picks platform is awesome, super easy to use. You pick a player's projected stats, and you pick whether you expect them to go more or less of those projected stats. So I'm ready for Monday Night Football tonight. Going to be a blast. And you know what? I just think life's a little bit too short to pick less. So I'm picking more for everybody. I think Christian McCaffrey, although he might not be fully healthy, he's going to have a big game. I'm going with more than his projected rush yarding total. Brandon Ayuk, he's been Brock Purdy's favorite target, especially for big plays. So I'm picking more for his 77.5 yards receiving. And TJ Hawkinson, you know what? That's a guy that can make some plays. He hasn't shown it yet this year, but he's got it in the tank and the potential there, so I'm picking more. And that's how it works. Now the fun part starts tonight. We watch if the players do, in fact, go through with what we're picking, more rushing yards for Christian McCaffrey, more receiving yards for Brandon Ayuk, and more receiving yards for TJ Hawkinson. So don't wait. You can join me on this endeavor as well. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Create an account. Use that promo code CLNS because we've got a $100 deposit match for you for being a Dolphins fan and being a Dolphins Today subscriber. So PrizePicks.com/CLNS. $100 deposit match courtesy of our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Now, I give Philly credit. I really do. I don't want this to be taken any other way. Jake was blaming the refs because I think losers blame the refs. Not blaming the refs, but we got to talk about what happened. And I saw this on Twitter. I saw it in the comments. The refs are blowing this game. The fix is in. I don't think any of that. But I do think there's some substance to how poorly that game was officiated and how it happened to go against Miami in literally all aspects. And I don't use that term literally lightly. Here is a quote from Mike McDaniel post-game on that final interception that Tua threw. Remember, it was intended for Raheem Morris. And yes, the ball was underthrown, but you clearly see Raheem Morris try to come back to the ball, and the quote from Mike McDaniel explains it perfectly. I was hoping Raheem could step back and make a play on the ball. he had an issue doing so with apparently what was legal contact down the field on the call. And you know what? There was another egregious face mask call that wasn't called on the fourth down against Cedric Wilson Jr., and it could have been defensive pass interference. It could have been called a face mask. Anyway, he wasn't able to come back to the ball and make the catch on the face mask. So 2 different times there and a number of different calls throughout the game that went against the Miami Dolphins. And this is crazy because the Eagles, they weren't penalized once. The Dolphins were penalized 10 times. And again, not crying about the officiating, but when there's tangible data there that's a little bit of an anomaly and kind of an outlier, you have to take a look at it because this is the first time this year that a team finished with 0 penalties. And of course, that's the least it's ever happened, the least output of penalties this season. And what's also interesting, it only happened 2 times a season ago, once by the Chiefs and once by the Packers. The year before that, never happened. And so it's very rare for a team to finish without a penalty. Now, again, not the biggest deal. We're not saying they lost the game because of the officiating, but it's worth pointing out some of these interesting outliers, statistically speaking, as it relates to the penalties. The 10-0 penalty disparity in the Dolphins' loss to the Eagles Sunday night was only the 7th time in NFL history one team was not penalized while an opponent was called for double-digit penalties. That's from David Fiona's there. And just the numbers in and of itself are a little bit crazy. 10 penalties for one team, 0 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Our guy Ari, this was tweeted out during the game, but James Bradberry got away with a pretty obvious face mask on Cedric Wilson, which we talked about on fourth down, officiating the story of Week 7, poor officiating in Sunday Night Football. So I ask you, I've got my opinion on this one, but I want to hear from you. What percentage are the refs to blame for that Dolphins loss to the Eagles? Let me know in the comments 1 through 100. Listen, I said it's a part of the game. Absolutely. I've got it at about a 5 to 10%. They didn't lose that game because of the officials, but it's still worth pointing out. Now, another overreaction from the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Dolphins' offensive line is a liability. I saw that term used quite often online over the last 24 hours, liability. And I would say the Dolphins' offensive line that they had in that game, yes, certainly an Achilles heel of this team. But let's remember, this Dolphins' offensive line is extremely beat up. But the numbers aren't pretty. Season low, 45 rush yards, -7 in the first half. Not great. In fact, that was egregiously bad. The worst first half rushing performance by the Dolphins since 2011. 4 sacks allowed in this loss, 4 sacks allowed in the loss against Buffalo. 5 penalties by the offensive line, 1 holding penalty that took a touchdown off the board. And so the Dolphins' worst position group, I would say, on Sunday was the offensive line. Now, with that said, they need to get healthy because when this offensive line is healthy, they have Connor Williams, and Teron Armstead hasn't played a ton this season, but when they are healthy, they've proven to be a valuable unit to this Dolphins team. But the injury woes just keep stacking up. Teron Armstead, I mentioned, injured reserve. Connor Williams missed the last 2 games. He is a focal point of that offensive line at the center position. And Isaiah Wynn, this one was tough to see him leave that Sunday Night Football game. More from Dolphins insider Barry Jackson. McDaniel today talking about some of those injuries, saying David Long Jr., who had a collision with Jevon Holland, was cleared last night and is not in concussion protocol. So that's good news. Some good news for the injury front, and he is good to go for this week. Isaiah Wynn, quad injury, and this is the one that stings. It looks like it will be weeks and not days. It wasn't a bump or a bruise. So another massive hit to this Dolphins offensive line. Isaiah Wynn expected to miss some time with the quad injury that he suffered in Sunday night's game against the Eagles. So like we've seen all year, now it's time to rearrange the pieces of the puzzle of that Dolphins offensive line. Teron Armstead already on injured reserve, meaning Kendall Lamb was playing left tackle. Isaiah Wynn now is injured and expected to miss some time. So Lester Cotton was who was filling in for him. He had a couple of penalties, not the best game Sunday night in replacement of Isaiah Wynn. Connor Williams missed the game. Liam Eichenberg, we know he has had his struggles at the backup center position. Rob Hunt over there at right guard and Austin Jackson. Both of them actually played pretty well. But more from Barry Jackson saying Wynn, an unfortunate loss. He was playing very well. Lester Cotton, Rob Jones, Liam Eichenberg, all options at left guard. McDaniel said he thinks Waddle's back will be all right and would practice Wednesday. So that's good news. They found a solution to it, they said. So Jaylen Waddle also left the game Sunday night, but the fact that they found a solution to it is encouraging news. And he got back in there and was a contributor on the offensive end. So, yes, it hurts to see another damaging blow to the Dolphins' offensive line, but you got to think about who's coming back for this Dolphins team and the fact that when they're healthy, they've proven to be a really good team. Now, this is one that we might spend a lot of time on this. We might not, because I've been harping on it all week. We still have not seen Cam Smith get an opportunity. And some are saying he might be a bust because he just can't crack the starting lineup. Even last night, you had Xavier Howard out. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey hasn't played yet this year. There are opportunities for somebody to step into that corner position, but it's been Eli Apple and Kader Kohou taking all the snaps, and then the other two corners that rotated in, Perry Nicholson, and, of course, the other corner that rotated in, Justin Bethel. So those are guys that are seeing time over Cam Smith, and Perry Nicholson and Justin Bethel, no disrespect against them, they're just not the type of players you'd expect to play over a guy you invested a second-round pick in. So the fact that Smith still hasn't seen any time, any meaningful time, yes, he played in mop-up duty against the Panthers, has me a little bit concerned, and I'm curious how you feel. Be honest. Are you worried Cam Smith might be that ugly B word, a bust? Type Y for yes in the comments or N for no. As we always do, we go straight to the source. What did Mike McDaniel have to say about it? Because he was asked last night after the game about Cam Smith not playing. And it's a little bit lengthy of a quote, so bear with me here. But he said, I think you have to do right by the team. You have to do right by the player to make sure that they're appropriately versed. The main thing with him is that he's, by all testaments, he's getting better and closer and closer to doing that. But you don't just have guys learn on the fly at a position like that, in my opinion. He went on to say, I really like the way that Cam goes about his business and how he competes. He'll see his time on the field at some point, but tonight was just not the night. And that's Mike McDaniel on Cam Smith. Again, you got to take the coach for his word. He says his time is coming and that he's just not ready yet, but I wonder how much longer he can go progressing until you got to throw him into the fire at some point. But obviously, you know, Mike McDaniel and Vic Fangio have a better feel on that than you or I. So, unfortunately, we got to dive into this part about the Dolphins and their injuries versus the Eagles. We talked about Jaylen Waddle. He's good, though. He returned. Isaiah Wynn with the quad injury. Jevon Holland returned, but is now actually still working through some of those concussion symptoms. And this from Barry Jackson again. Jevon Holland, who collided with David Long Jr. during Sunday's game, but then returned, was cleared in the game by the doctor, meaning he was cleared to return. However, during follow-up today, he reported symptoms, so now he's in concussion protocol. That's one more player to keep your eye on in Jevon Holland. And then David Long Jr. also had some concussion symptoms, but again, he is cleared and good to go. Injuries versus Eagles, an unfortunate reality part of the game. Isaiah Wynn, that one hurts. Hopefully it is not too lengthy of a time. But we did get a little bit more news on Dolphins today. Kind of, I don't know if you say this is good news, bad news. No team that's ever been the in-season Hard Knocks has ever made the playoffs, but the Dolphins are going to change that. I've got a good feeling about that. So it was announced today that the in-season Hard Knocks team that will be featured are the Miami Dolphins. So you can check it out on Max. It's not called HBO anymore. I mess that up all the time. Check it out on Max, but it'll be fun to see this Dolphins team in action and get to a little bit more of the behind-the-scenes feel as well. So thank everybody for tuning in to Dolphins Today. Really appreciate it. And again, we are so close to that milestone. So if you haven't yet, you like what you see, you watch the entire video, smash that sub button. Help us get to 48K so we can keep bringing you Dolphins content day in, day out. Dolphins breaking news, Dolphins trade rumors, and of course, Overreaction Mondays like today. But don't worry, still in first place in the AFC East. Looking forward to seeing this Dolphins team continue to climb, and we'll have you ready all week long as Miami gets set for a divisional matchup against the Patriots. So shout out producer Jack. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Dolphins Today. See you.